AJ, welcome to Breakdown. SEC versus the Big Ten. It's September the 12th. We had some football over the weekend.
Football we had.
You want to talk about it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Where should we start, JJ? SEC or the Big Ten?
Let's start with what conference would you prefer to start with?
Well, you know what? Let me ask you a question. If you were to wake up, had you woken up Sunday morning and someone told you you were fired, but you're going to be getting $5 million prorated for this year, and then another $5 million next year, and another $5 million in 2024, and then $2.5 million the next 2 years, how would you feel?
Honestly, you would have had me at the first $5 million.
Okay, that's Scott Frost. So let's start with Nebraska.
Okay, let's start with Nebraska.
Hey, last year they played all those close games. This year,
They played a lot of close games.
and they lost. What do you think about the Nebraska deal?
Well, I just think that they have a crazy NIL situation set up in place. They have rabid fan base. They have a lot of things that you need infrastructurally to be a successful football program, and I just think that it goes to show you how serious they are when they fire a guy. That if they had just waited October 1st, a mere 20-some days, they would have saved $7.5 million on his buyout.
Only money. Hey JJ, we're starting with the Big Ten. The Big Ten didn't have a great weekend in all when you consider everything. What games you want to talk about from the Big Ten?
Well, we can talk about a lot of the games. I don't know. The game that sticks out to me after that would probably be the Iowa State game.
Okay. First time in a while Iowa State won that rivalry.
Yeah, I think it's been the first time in 7 years, 6 or 7 years.
I can't remember. I know it was more than 5.
Yeah.
It was more than 5.
And they barely won it. They had to go 99 yards down the field late in the fourth to pull out a victory.
So you said that this game sticks out for you. Anything else you want to talk about in that game? Were you surprised by the score, by the results?
Not after the prior week's performance by Iowa against what was it? They played South Dakota.
Yeah, South Dakota was their first game.
7-3, and they didn't score a touchdown. That was embarrassing. It just makes you wonder how much nepotism goes into play when Kirk Ferentz's son is their offensive coordinator, Brian Ferentz, and he gets paid about $1 million a year, almost $1 million a year, to put up last year what was the worst offense in Power 5 football. And this year looks like it's heading on track to be worse than that.
And I hear you. But you said the Iowa State game was one of the most interesting. To me, the Wisconsin-Washington State game, it was a surprise, a huge surprise. They were favored by, I believe, 18 points in that neighborhood, and to lose at home to Washington State, that was a surprise for me.
It was a surprise as well. If you had told me Wisconsin lost and Wisconsin only put up 14 points of offense, and their running back had almost 100 yards on the ground, I would have figured that Graham Mertz would have been the problem. I mean, normally in years prior, Wisconsin loses that game, it's because of their quarterback. But that was not the case. He played fine. He was one of the 5 best players on Wisconsin's team. I mean, that was like a coaching miscue, play calling, just like mistake-riddled game by Wisconsin. And yeah, I just wouldn't have expected them to lose like that to Washington State.
Northwestern was double-digit favorite over Duke. They lost to Duke. And then Nebraska losing to Georgia Southern. The Big Ten West, man, they had 4 losses, and I think they were favored in all of those games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how much the Northwestern one really matters, though, if we're being all honest. I mean, they were never a player. They were never supposed to do anything. The Nebraska one is interesting because it makes you wonder who's going to take that position.
Iowa State's
Matt Campbell is a leader in the clubhouse, and you have Mark Stoops apparently
Ooh.
Kentucky.
He would leave a basketball school to go to a football school.
Well, Nebraska isn't a basketball school. It depends.
That's true.
It's in a bigger city for a college town.
Which do you think is the better hire?
I think Matt Campbell is a better just X's and O's coach. I think Mark Stoops is a better coach as it pertains to like delegating and recruiting
and winning. If it's all about winning, is it?
I don't know. I don't know who would do a better job winning. I think both of those guys could be set up to do really well. Actually, they're both Ohio guys. I think they could both do pretty well, staying in the Midwest but going to Nebraska.
Well, one of the bright spots for the Big Ten West was Illinois. They beat a Power 5 school in Virginia. Any other Big Ten teams you want to talk about, JJ?
Yeah. So, as it pertains to like last week and not projecting into next week, I would say the only other team to talk about would be Michigan.
Okay.
They settled on a quarterback. JJ McCarthy will be the quarterback going forward. He threw 11 of 12 passes against Hawaii. I mean that they were a nobody, but as I said earlier, I'm just interested in seeing him play and getting all the reps that he can get.
Is Cade McNamara going to hang around, or is he going to leave?
Well, he didn't even look like he would necessarily have won the backup job. He threw a pick unlike Davis Warren. Davis Warren didn't throw a pick. He's a walk-on, so I would anticipate if Cade stayed, he would get the backup job. But he has looked really bad. So
okay. Well, let's talk about this game coming up this week.
Okay.
What's the biggest one in your mind?
Oh, to me, it's Penn State versus Auburn.
I agree. At Auburn.
Yeah, that's a hard place to play.
Another big one. Michigan State at Washington. But let's talk about the Auburn-Penn State game. Who you think will come out in that one?
I would anticipate Penn State, who finally cracked the top 25, to be victorious at Auburn, a team that I think won by 5 points over San Jose State.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What about the Washington-Michigan State game?
I haven't watched a lot of Washington. The Pac-12 has been like strong, if not top heavy. I think they have like a lot of like good teams. Washington State proved that by beating Wisconsin, USC, UCLA looked pretty good. So like I think they're like a solid conference. But Washington, I haven't watched much of Washington, but I would expect Michigan State to beat Washington.
I do too. I think Michigan State's defense is going to overwhelm Washington. I haven't seen the point spread, and I should have looked at them before we came on the air, but I expect Michigan State to win by double digits. That's my take on it. What other game from the Big Ten you want to talk about for this coming week? Or are there any others?
Well, I mean, Nebraska-Oklahoma should be somewhat interesting.
I agree.
Oklahoma struggled to gain momentum last week before, in the first half at least. In the second half, they kind of steamrolled them. But I can't remember is it Venables is the name? He's a new coach there.
Yeah,
it's Brett Venables.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting
from
Clemson. Yeah, the perennial defensive coordinator for Clemson. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma looks against Nebraska. It'll be interesting to see how Nebraska plays under their interim head coach.
Well, I tell you, I watched some of that Georgia Southern-Nebraska game. Georgia Southern was moving the ball whenever they wanted to. So if Nebraska plays like that against Oklahoma, and I can't find any reason to expect Nebraska to start playing better, I think they're going to be in for a long season unless they learn how to play some defense. Because I have not seen anything in defense from Nebraska. That's just me. I mean, I would probably give 40 points in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I don't know if I trust Oklahoma's offense that much. They UCF transfer, the lefty, he's solid if unremarkable. And I think Nebraska has a solid enough defense. I think, Nebraska is going to play in close games. It's what they do.
Okay, that's what you say. I'm saying differently. Let's move to the SEC, JJ.
All right, let's move on.
What stood out in your mind from last week, games in the SEC? What game? There were quite a few that stood out for me.
Well, the game that stood out to me the most would be the Appalachian State Texas A&M game. I think that was a pretty significant standout.
Was that a bigger upset than the 2007 Appalachian defeat of Mr. Carr and the Wolverines in Ann Arbor? Which is the bigger?
No, it wasn't as big an upset because Texas A&M was only ranked 6th in the country.
Michigan was ranked 5th.
Michigan was ranked 5th. And if you recall, Michigan, Appalachian State was not in the same division that
That's right.
They were in FCS or 1AA as it was called back then.
Yeah.
So now they've been bumped up to FBS, and it was quite a day for the conference, the Sun Belt, we'll say.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Notre Dame isn't in the Big Ten or the SEC, but they fell victim to the conference as well.
Yeah,
Marshall.
I wish one other Sun Belt conference team would have won. That would have been Arkansas State, but they couldn't beat Ohio State Saturday. But the Sun Belt Conference did.
They showed well for themselves.
They did. So you take us you got Penn State winning that game against Auburn this coming weekend. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. We were talking about last week games first. I was thinking Auburn.
Yeah, I would just say, in addition to Texas A&M losing to Appalachian State, they also lost game day because they played Miami upcoming this week, and it would have been Appalachians. It would have been at College Station, but now it's going to be at Boone, North Carolina for Appalachian State.
You mentioned that. I'm getting way off track, but I have A&M losing. They just lost to App State. I have them losing to Miami, and then they got to play Arkansas. I have them losing 3 games in a row. And talk about this Texas A&M recruiting class, JJ. Any word on how they've done over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, they've been top 10 every year. Last year they were number 1. I mean, Jimbo hasn't shown enough for me to be as excited as you had been about the Texas A&M Alabama game. They went 8-4 last year, even after that mighty victory over Alabama. Yeah. His record again at Texas A&M is 1 game worse than Kevin Sumlin's.
One game worse
at this point in time. So he's not.
In his recruiting classes has been far better than Sumlin's.
Yeah, and Sumlin's were pretty good, but in SEC, pretty good recruiting doesn't get you far. You have to be at the top of the top. And that freshman class, it's freshmen and it's SEC, so you're not expecting a lot of them to play. A lot of those, those are true freshmen. So the number 1 class, hopefully they'll have a lot more to show for themselves. But yeah, their current recruiting has not lived up to their record. The record has not lived up to their record.
Well, the A&M played a big game Saturday. There was at least 3 other. What were some other big games for you on Saturday from the SEC?
Well, game day this past week was at Austin, Texas for the Texas Alabama matchup.
Which turned out to be a game.
It did, and had Texas's quarterback, remained healthy the entire game, that outcome might have been very different. But as everything shook out, Texas did lose in the last second.
20-19.
20-19 on the field goal. Right after they, with under 2 minutes to go, kicked the field goal to take the lead. It was a very back and forth game, and even though it was a low scoring game, it was a very competitive game. It was entertaining to watch if you weren't a fan of Alabama. I imagine that would not have been very satisfying to watch their offense.
Another back and forth game, Tennessee and Pitt.
Yeah, it went to overtime.
It did. It was a good game. I had not expected it to be as close as it was. I expected Tennessee offense to their offense was good, but I expect them to be even better than what they were. But they still won against a really good Pitt team.
Yeah, a Pitt team who lost their quarterback at halftime. Keaton Slovis got a concussion, and their backup had to come in. And he played admirably well. Was able to lead Pitt to overtime. But Hendon Hooker played outstanding. Had over 320 yards passing. He was the SEC Player of the Week.
Was he?
He was. Yeah. Cedric Tillman, the receiver, had over 150 yards receiving. So that was a good showing for the SEC.
I'm
where Alabama didn't show particularly well for themselves, although Texas is a future SEC opponent, and obviously Texas A&M lost App State.
One last game before we start talking about this coming week's game. Florida and Kentucky. That game last week. I was surprised by the outcome of that. And I thought maybe Kentucky's quarterback would have been SEC Player of the Week this year rather than the one whom you just mentioned from Tennessee.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Anthony Richardson, he threw a pick six, which
Florida.
Kentucky really needed. Yeah. And he was limited to 4 yards rushing. Kentucky really was able to contain him on the ground as well.
Yes.
So
Kentucky looked awesome in that game.
they did look awesome, but also Florida looked a little inept themselves.
They
Like,
did.
I think
very much so.
I think some of that wasn't Kentucky induced, but I think some of that was Florida doing that to themselves. But I will say Florida has won 3 of 5 against or Kentucky has won 3 of 5 against Florida.
That's amazing.
This is the first time they've been ranked in the top 10 since 2007, and this is Mark Stoops showing that Kentucky might not just be a basketball school.
Okay.
Maybe they are a football school.
Point well taken. We're going to move on to this upcoming game, JJ. But in the SEC, who sits alone in first place in the SEC? Oh, sorry.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was going to be Georgia or something like that. I don't.
I mean, in the SEC,
Yeah,
in the
conference.
SEC West.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one team that's undefeated among conference schools in the SEC West, and right now they're in first place. And I venture to say they will end that way. But let's go on to the upcoming game, JJ. We mentioned the Auburn-Penn State game. You got Penn State. Is that what you got? A close game? How you got that?
I don't know. I don't really think Auburn. I don't really think Auburn has the offense to stick with Penn State if Sean Clifford comes to play like the way that he can. But I mean, he's a trick or treat quarterback. He can always. I mean, you really don't know what you're going to get from Sean Clifford. So I think it depends on him. Because no matter what, like going into Auburn and playing in at their stadium, it's hard to do even if they are unranked and even if their coach is on the hot seat, even if
very hot,
they're projected to finish one of the bottom teams in the SEC West. That's still a hard environment to go into, and I could see a scenario in which Auburn would win. I still would pick Penn State in the landslide.
Okay. I think it'll be close. What about A&M and Miami? We touched on that earlier. I already told you what I think is going to happen.
I think Jimbo knows the ACC pretty well. I think he does usually tighten up after a really bad loss. So I would expect them to be very focused and very locked in. I would expect Texas A&M. I wouldn't really anticipate.
It's a home game for Texas A&M.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect Haynes King to light the world on fire, but I think that Miami is a little. I think they're kind of a paper tiger. I don't really think they've proven too much.
And I think A&M is as well.
Yeah, and I think A&M is as well, but I'll take the home team.
2 paper tigers going against each other. Any other games coming up this week in the SEC that get your attention?
Not particularly. It's a really bad week slate.
Well, I got one. I got a conference game. Mississippi State at LSU.
Okay.
I think that's a key game for Brian Kelly. It's at LSU. Mississippi State, they're going to be doing the air raid. I'm not sold on LSU's pass defense.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Fauci he's academically ineligible to play. He was going to be one of their starting quarters, or at least a guy that
he was transferred from Arkansas.
Yeah. Originally from Louisiana.
True.
But he was going to at least be in the rotation, if not be a starter. He was going to see the field a lot, and Will Rogers can light up any SEC team, including a depleted LSU team. So
who you got in that game?
I got LSU. I think they have a better coach. I think Brian Kelly's a better coach.
I agree. They have a much better coach.
And I think they have better players. And I just think, I'm just going to go with Brian Kelly in his second real game at LSU.
His second real game?
Yeah.
Okay. Florida State and Southern, one of them didn't count.
No. Well, we can guess which one didn't count.
Yes, we can. Hey, JJ, this is pretty much a wrap. But I'm gonna let you know in advance. Beginning next week, we're gonna do the sweet and spicy dirty dozen. You're gonna have to pick for 6 games, 3 from the SEC. Well, maybe not 3 all the way. 6 games, you got to pick against the point spread.
All right, sounds good.
All right. That's a wrap. WPS. Woo, pigs, sweet. We got it. You ready?
All right.